Hello, and welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week, we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of The Joy of Cooking, kitchen victories and misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you've joined us at the table today. I'm Shannon Larson, home cook, ardent Joy of Cooking user and fan, and celery enthusiast.
I'm Megan Scott, co-author of the 2019 edition of The Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night, but I make a mean cherry pie.
I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. I'm our in-house breakfast expert and do most of the dishes.
Welcome to the podcast, Shannon. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our co-host, because I feel like when John and I were talking about doing a podcast, we were excited to do it, but also we're both really introverted and quiet people, and we needed a third person to kind of keep things going and keep the mood up. And I feel like you're going to be that person. So I hope you're ready for that.
Well, I'm very honored that you asked me. I also am glad that you aren't sick of me constantly asking you what I should make for dinner, because that's just something I do already. And this is a chance for me to get more inspiration from you all. So thanks. I'm so looking forward to it.
What have you been up to this week? What have you been cooking?
Well, speaking of asking you what I should cook for dinner, I cooked ratatouille for friends that I had over the other night. I hosted 4 people, and we wanted to make sure it was vegetarian friendly, and ratatouille is one of my favorite dishes, but for some reason my brain just wasn't going there. And so asking you all, what should I make? And that was the first thing you said. And I was like, well, duh, of course, that's a great answer. But I'm just trying to enjoy all of the summer bounty right now. I've been eating probably 12 tomatoes a day is what it feels like right now. Just trying to get it all in, and a ton of cucumbers.
Because you guys are growing cucumbers, right?
Yeah, and they're really large cucumbers, but they're really, really tasty. So we've been enjoying that. I actually don't know what kind they are because they were planted by the previous owners of the house we just bought. But
what a gift.
I should thank them.
Yeah.
I should send a thank you note.
Yeah, you guys really lucked out with that garden.
Yeah, very lucky.
No, this is like the best time of year for cooking and for eating, because all the summer things are still happening, all the peppers and the tomatoes and basil, but we're starting to get fall vegetables, and also the weather is kind of in this nice in-between place where you can go super cozy or still do summer things.
Yeah, fall food is actually my favorite, but these couple of weeks when it's in between is really fun because you get to start making like soup, but you still have those yummy tomatoes. Yes. So it's great. What all have you guys been up to and cooking this week?
I mean, Megan's parents recently visited, and also there was a celebration. It was Megan's birthday, and so, did a celebratory spaghetti and meatball feast, a Mississippi mud cake.
My favorite cake in the world.
Yeah, it's a standing tradition now. I've made it, I don't know.
Can I ask what a Mississippi mud cake is?
Well, this Mississippi mud cake is kind of non-traditional. It's from the Baked cookbook, which is Baked is a bakery in Brooklyn. I believe they still exist, and they have a few different cookbooks, and they all have amazing like celebration cakes in them. And I've made a bunch of them, but John always makes the Mississippi mud one for my birthday because it's amazing. So you should talk about it.
It's an Oreo crust, and then you have a flourless chocolate cake that's baked into the Oreo crust after that's been cooled down. And then you cool that down, and meanwhile you are making and then chilling a really rich chocolate pudding, cornstarch pudding, and then then it gets assembled, and then whipped cream on top. So
that sounds so good.
It's like chocolate on chocolate on chocolate. It's so good. Yeah.
I mean, each component is simple, but it takes a while to put them all together. And I managed to do both the cake and all of the dinner like from scratch in
You did such a good job.
Like 6 hours, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It was good.
Sounds amazing.
5 stars.
And happy birthday.
Thank you. So I thought for this first episode that we would just talk a little bit about how each of us came to Joy of Cooking and then how we met each other, because I feel like everyone's joy origin story is really fun and interesting, and I love hearing them. So I guess, Shannon, would you mind going first and just talk about how you came to Joy of Cooking?
I feel like my Joy of Cooking origin story is probably similar to a lot of people's Joy of Cooking origin stories, where I remember the cookbook in my grandmother's kitchen, and it was just kind of the book that was always there, and the one that she would always go to. So my mom has her copy, and I have already claimed that for when my mom is ready to let it go. But I already have the same copy. But it's just like I want my grandma's. It's very personal to me. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same way about their family Joy of Cookings. Um, so that was my first introduction to the cookbook, and I had a copy in college that I used, and that's when I actually started cooking for myself when I got out of the dorms, of course. And it's just kind of been this thing in my life, and I can't imagine my life without it. It's just my go-to cookbook, and has been even before I knew you two.
Nice.
So,
do you remember what the cover looked like of your grandmother's edition?
Gold. It had gold,
like gold and white.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the 70s.
Yeah, I think that's the one. I'm sure she had one before that too, but I think that was probably the one she used when she was really raising my mom and her brothers. Yeah, because I think that's what the go-to was for her.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, no, best-selling edition. Good choice.
Yeah. I came to the Joy of Cooking. I actually didn't grow up with Joy of Cooking. My mom is a Southern Living person. She has she did have, I don't know if she still does, but she had every single Southern Living year cookbook because they put out one every single year. I think it just has all the recipes that were in the magazines throughout the year collected in one volume, but she was collecting each year's book. So that was what we grew up eating, was like Southern Living recipes. But when I went to college and started like the summer after my freshman year, I started cooking more for myself and realized I just didn't really know how to cook much of anything on my own. And so I went to Barnes and Noble and I was like on the hunt for a cookbook, and I saw Joy of Cooking, and I knew that it was supposed to be this cookbook you could buy that would kind of teach you how to do anything. And so I bought it. That was my first cookbook that I ever bought for myself. And I learned how to roast a chicken. Like I remember roasting my first chicken because it seemed so scary. Like I really didn't want to mess it up because it's this big piece of meat and it's kind of intimidating. And Joy of Cooking helped me cook that. And I remember it being good. I don't know how I would judge it now, but I thought it was good at the time. I learned how to make pies. I learned how to make like apple butter, so many things. And then eventually I met John, but we'll get to that later. First, I want to hear from John about what it was like growing up with Joy of Cooking, being in your family.
Growing up with the Joy of Cooking seemed, somewhat normal. I mean, I had nothing else to compare it to. When I was with my mother, it was just, a presence on the shelf. She would pull it down and cook from it every now and then, but it wasn't like, she would sometimes reminisce about Marion.
And that's your grandmother.
Sorry. Yes, that's my grandmother, who, well, she was involved since the very beginning, but she was responsible primarily for the 1963 and 1975 editions. But my mother, obviously, she knew her well, and so I got to know Joy primarily like through her just sharing these like little moments that she had shared with Marion. And yeah, so on the other hand, when I was with my father, because I would spend my summers with him, yeah, there was like a lot of activity going on all the time. There was like an entire office in the home that had Marion's library of cookbooks, and there were like there were at least two people in the office at any given moment. There was a copier. My dad had like all of.
He had a personal copier.
He had a big old Xerox, and there were like Apple computers back when they were pretty expensive.
Dang.
And I feel like that part of it was always really impressive, but it was like kind of like a, an office space experience of Joy of Cooking. My dad was like he didn't take very good notes in the kitchen. So, whenever I saw him cooking, it was usually like kind of an off the cuff thing. And the Joy of Cooking was never around when he was actually like in the kitchen cooking.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
With my experience also of your dad cooking.
So yeah, I didn't really get to become like intimately familiar with the book until college. My dorm room actually had a kitchenette in it.
Oh, fancy.
Dang.
Yeah, Boston University had to buy up like a lot of like apartment buildings in order to find housing for people in the Back Bay. Yeah, I remember cooking out of the book for the first time then. And
Do you remember what you made?
it was like a lemon roast chicken meal for like, I think I had maybe 6 people over. Like, it was a pretty small room. I mean, the kitchen was tiny, and it was like a combined kitchen slash dining area. So it was like a one bud kitchen. Yeah, it was lemon marinated roast chicken. I think that this actually wasn't Enjoy. It was like it was like my attempt to do a dish from the Montage restaurant in Portland. It was called Old Mac, but yeah, it was really basic. It was
Basic mac and cheese.
It was like, it's more basic than your average mac and cheese recipe.
Did you know how influential The Joy of Cooking was at that point, or was it just kind of, ho-hum to you?
Yeah, I mean, I had some idea of it, but my friends, their parents would have it like on their shelves, and before I went off to college, the 1997 edition came out during my senior year in high school, and the IACP convention was in Portland that year. The International Association of Culinary Professionals award ceremony was there at the Schnitzer. And so I actually did get to go to that. So yeah, I had some
And
idea.
met Julia Child there, right?
I wasn't going to say that.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
No,
That's
it's fine.
amazing.
Yeah, I got to meet her. She was very tall. And she told me to go to culinary school.
Nice.
And that's pretty much all I can remember about that interaction. It probably wasn't much longer than that.
Well,
That's amazing.
yeah, that's amazing. And that kind of leads nicely into how we met, because John and I met in Asheville, North Carolina. We both went to college there. And we weren't going to school at the same time. He had already graduated. He was working at a coffee shop near downtown, and I was working at a bakery in a natural foods grocery store. One day at work, I was just talking with another coworker about Joy of Cooking and how much I loved it and what I was making out of it and how it was teaching me how to cook so many things. And he said something like, well, did you know that the guy whose family wrote Joy of Cooking works at that coffee shop over there? It was called the Drippolator. And I thought he was kind of messing with me, but I wanted to just ask because I went there all the time. And so the next time I went to the coffee shop, I was ordering my drink and I asked the barista, hey, do you know anything about this person whose family supposedly wrote The Joy of Cooking working here? And it happened to be John, who was working, and he blushed he turned so red.
So not surprising.
Yeah, he blushed so much.
Well, yeah,
and
totally turning red right now.
And he was like, "Oh, that's my family." In such a very demure way, which I thought was charming. And I proceeded to awkwardly ask him out on a date because I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. I don't think
that was the same. That wasn't the same interaction, though.
It was.
Was it?
Yeah, because I was like,
Oh,
what do
man.
you do when you're not at work? And you said something about being in a book club. And then I was like, no. I mean, do you want to hang out sometime? I think it was.
I didn't have much going on.
And he was
Obviously.
flattered, of course.
Yeah, well, it worked out. And then, so I wanted to just talk about how we three met so that everyone knows how we met. But we moved to Portland in 2013, and I was just trying to meet people, which as an adult is surprisingly hard because you mostly interact with people through your job or, it was through school for a long time. So trying to meet new people in a new city. I can't even remember how I found out about Canning Club, but I found out about Canning Club and decided to start going. And I think I went without John at first because you were working probably at the
Or
coffee
I was being a
shop.
stick in the mud.
Or you just
one or the
didn't
other.
want to go. So I started going to Canning Club. Canning Club is, for a little bit of context, is just people bring like 5 jars of something that they made to trade with other people who also made things. And I don't remember if I met you the first time I went, but I kind of clocked you as like, oh, I was like, she knows people. Like she seems cool. We're going to hang out. And so I kind of weaseled my way into Canning Club and into Shannon's life.
Well, and I remember one time I was driving to Canning Club. It was also called the Portland Preservation Society. And you were waiting for a bus to get to one of the meetings. And I pulled over and picked you up and drove you. And I think that was the like moment that we really like started the friendship.
Yeah.
John wasn't around at that point. He was still being a stick in the mud.
Yeah, with the stick in the mud that had the car.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and from there, I mean, I feel like that's how I've met most of my adult friends, and it's been such a great community builder and also a great way for people to get their hands into the joy of cooking too, because a lot of recipe testers were for the newest edition were through that, and just a really solid group of people.
Yeah. So I want to introduce our topic for the show today, which is eggplant. And the reason we chose eggplant was just because it was kind of the stand-in. You know, when we were talking about starting this podcast, we would say something like, we can talk about anything on the podcast, like eggplant. And then it just became kind of a running joke. And so now we have to talk about eggplant.
It has to be the first episode.
Yes, it has to be
a stand-in for the possibilities.
All the possibilities.
Well, and the misunderstanding of what I think is a delicious vegetable.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
So each show we will taste something either that we made or bought or was sent to us. And since we're talking about eggplant this week, I made some baba ganoush to share with the table. So baba ganoush is something we make all the time. We make it especially when we are going to a potluck or Canning Club. I feel like I've made it for Canning Club multiple times. Because it's so easy, and it's vegan, it's gluten-free, so everybody can usually eat it. And we kind of use this cheater shortcut method for making it, where we buy jarred eggplant that's already been roasted. There's this really nice little shop in Montevillo, which is near where we both live.
It's amazing.
That has like it's like a Lebanese market, and so they have all these different kinds of jarred like eggplant and jarred peppers, but the roasted eggplant is just eggplant. I think there's some salt in there, but it's already kind of mashed up and perfectly cooked. So all you have to do is mix it in a bowl with some tahini, lemon juice, garlic, salt, cumin, olive oil, and that's it.
Yeah, baba ganoush is easy no matter what, but roasting it, charring it, it takes time. Very little sacrifice when it comes to the quality by just going with this, it's not cheating.
It's not cheating. It's just being smart.
You guys have also brought it on camping trips that we've gone on, and I feel like first of all, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, everything tastes better. But this specifically, like, is over the top delicious whenever I have it in the middle of nowhere. It's salty enough and makes you like drink more water too. It's a great camping food, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not super perishable because it doesn't have any dairy in it. So I feel less sketched out by having it in a cooler for a weekend.
Or sitting on the picnic table for a couple of hours, which is usually what happens because we're all eating too much of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get the jarred roasted eggplant at Mediterranean markets or Middle Eastern markets. Locally, we get it at a place called La Bouffe, but it's pretty widely available. The brands vary. The one we bought today is Zergut, which seems German, so maybe European grocery stores too would have it. But there are different brands, and it's just a really nice thing to have in the pantry because then you're like 5 minutes away from making baba ganoush at any moment.
I feel like it's a great option for those like last minute, oh no, we have people coming over, I need to throw something together. This is going to take you no time, and it's a hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like the only time I've gotten better or smokier baba ganoush is if I actually fire up the grill to char the eggplant, and that's just that is a whole thing. Yeah. I've tried to make it more convenient by like when I'm done grilling something, I've actually planned ahead before and had an eggplant to just throw on after I've grilled, and then I just kind of just
roast it in there.
Just roast it in there while the coals are still hot.
Yeah, we usually don't have it together enough
just
to
not
plan that much.
Yeah.
I also think the other thing about baba ganoush that I like is that it's not just a dip for like pita or crackers. I obviously really like celery, and I think it's really good on celery or carrots or roasted vegetables, even other roasted vegetables. So, especially for people who don't eat gluten, I think there's a lot more use for it outside of just a traditional dip.
Agreed. Let's talk more about eggplant. Since that's our topic today.
Well, I really wish that we called them aubergines, personally. I think it's a
know,
much
that's
more
so
beautiful
good.
word. And I wonder if people would have less of like a eggplant if we called it something prettier, like aubergine. I don't know. This is my husband talking right now. It took me a lot of convincing him that like eggplants are really delicious because I think he grew up eating it just like breaded and fried, and so it didn't have any flavor and was just kind of mushy. I mean, it is mushy, but like,
Well, it picks up a lot of oil,
yeah,
especially if you're just breading it. And if it's on a batter, it seems like it absorbed the frying oil like pretty like efficiently.
yeah.
I don't remember growing up eating it at all. I think probably my introduction to it was eggplant parmesan, like most people. I didn't really understand how to cook it for a really long time. And so it intimidated me. And I also had some bad eggplant experiences where it was undercooked and it kind of has that spongy texture if it's not cooked quite enough.
Yeah, it is spongy.
And that kind of put me off of it. My introduction to like learning how to cook eggplant in a way that it was like a light bulb moment for me was from the Ottolenghi cookbook Plenty. And it's a baked or roasted eggplant with a buttermilk yogurt sauce. But the cooking method is you cut the eggplant in half and then you kind of score it with a little knife into like a crosshatch pattern. And then you like brush it with kind of a lot of olive oil. And I think that was kind of shocking to me because I was like, oh, you want a lot of oil for eggplant? But then I tried it. I like trusted the process and tried it. And the way it like turned the eggplant flesh into just almost like creamy, it was so good and so satisfying. And the texture was perfect. And I was like, oh, this is what eggplant can be like if you cook it, if you know how to cook it. And so after that, I feel like that kind of broke down the walls and I was like, okay, eggplant, I'm cool with eggplant. We're good.
My grandmother, it was her favorite dish. She loved eggplant parmesan so much. So anytime we would go out to eat and there was eggplant parmesan on the menu, that's what Bess was going to order. And so fortunately, I grew up eating decent eggplant parmesan and like respecting it. So thanks, Bess, for that. I feel like there's good eggplant parmesan. There's really good eggplant parmesan. And then there's not so good eggplant parmesan. Yeah. So it also takes time. And I think sometimes that can be a little overwhelming to cook eggplant. It is a little bit more on the time consuming end like it takes a little bit more time in the oven to get it right. So that's why the jarred stuff is great and other options too. So.
Yeah. And one of our favorite ways to cook it now that's a little less time intensive is it's actually a Fuchsia Dunlop recipe from her book, The Food of Szechuan. It's called Fish Fragrant Eggplant. And you use kind of the slender eggplants and cut them into batons. You quickly fry them. Well, actually, back up. You have to salt them first and let them drain for a little bit, like 30 minutes, I think. And kind of what that does is compacts the flesh so it doesn't absorb as much oil when it's being fried. And then you quickly fry it like 3 minutes, I think, something like that. And then you make a sauce with the Szechuan chili bean paste and ginger and garlic and I forget what else. It's pretty simple but delicious sauce. And then you add the fried eggplant back to the sauce to kind of coat it and then add a little bit of like a potato starch slurry to thicken it. So it's just like the texture of the eggplant is really silky. The sauce is like super flavorful, not super spicy, but really flavorful and good.
I feel like we're always using cornstarch. I know that she switched over, I feel like between editions of Food of Szechuan from cornstarch to potato starch. I'm sure there's a really good reason for it. She might even explain it.
Well, someone I was talking to about this too, because we never have potato starch around.
Right.
So we just use cornstarch, but apparently it's a little less gloppy. So we should try it. But
Yeah.
you can use cornstarch. You just have to kind of drizzle it in and not go overboard with it.
And you have eggplant recipes in the Joy, obviously, the
Yes.
miso eggplant.
The miso eggplant
Yes.
is so good.
So good.
Yeah, that's one of our that's probably the recipe we make the most often because it truly is very quick and easy. It's like 4 ingredients, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, very little prep, 4 ingredients, and you can do it all in the time. The broiler takes to preheat pretty much,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take long to cook. So,
And it's just the long skinny eggplants that you cut in half and you roast them at a pretty high heat until they're tender. You flip them over and you brush them with a mixture of miso, mirin, sake.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's miso, mirin, and sake. But we've also used, like, if I don't have sake, I will use a splash of white wine.
Mhm.
Or sometimes if I don't have mirin, I will just add a little bit of sugar to the mixture. Just something kind of a little bit sweet and savory. And you brush that on top and broil it until it's caramelized. And it is fantastic. And that is a Nobu dish, right?
I think it's just a traditional Japanese preparation, but yes, I do think
Famously from Nobu.
right.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
I feel like our copy of the Joy, the newest edition, we have certain pages that are more wrinkly than other
Mhm.
pages, and that's one of those wrinkly pages in the book.
Yes.
Along with like your pizza dough recipe, for example, which is really gross looking at this point. But the miso eggplant is one of those standbys. I make that often. I'm still trying to convince my husband that eggplant's amazing. So when he's out of town, that's one of the things that I'll make for myself too.
So he's still not on the eggplant train.
He's getting closer to getting on that train. I'm working on it. But it also makes good leftovers because, like, I'll go into the office and bring that with a little bit of like cooked rice and some greens or something that I make with it, and it's a perfect like bowl in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
I'll keep you updated on.
Okay, yeah, let me know
Me
how it
telling
goes.
John
We've got to
how great it
convince
is. Yeah.
John that it's worth eating.
We'll just call it aubergines from now on.
Yeah, aubergine. It's very French.
Yes.
What do you think about salting eggplant? Do you salt it, or do you kind of feel like it's old-fashioned thing to do?
I don't know. So I do sometimes, and then like we just used Melissa Clark's ratatouille recipe from the New York Times because I really like the way that she breaks up each ingredient and bakes it differently at different times. So each vegetable has the time it needs to like get the way it needs to be, and then you put it together. And we didn't salt it beforehand, and it was freaking amazing. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I was looking back at older editions, and Irma, even in like the 1936 edition, she was just like, salting, Like,
yeah, she was kind of like, it takes so much time and you really don't need to do that, which is kind of funny because I feel like I think of salting as this old fashioned thing, but even in 1936, Irma was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that.
And that adds to the time it takes to cook it too. So if it really doesn't make a difference, then I think it would be less.
It definitely makes a difference in that it gets rid of moisture from the eggplant flesh, which, and it helps break down the structure of the eggplant, which is supposed to keep it from absorbing as much oil. But yeah, there's also this other thing where it's supposed to get rid of bitterness. That may have been true back in the day when, the olden times when eggplants were bitter, or, maybe we have fancy breeding has gotten rid of the bitterness, but it definitely seems like something you don't really run into. Like bitter eggplants.
I've never had an eggplant that I would say was bitter.
I wonder if that's also just being lucky and living in Portland and so close to such great produce. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I was actually, I did some digging just to see about the bitterness factor and eggplants. And I guess that, like if you harvest them when they're mature in that they're ready to, like the seeds are ready, like they'll propagate the best. It actually gets much more bitter as time goes on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when they're being harvested, like for
the grocery store,
for grocery store, like I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
And then supposedly, like the longer you store them, the more bitter the skin gets, but the flesh doesn't get.
Okay, so if you've stored your eggplant, then maybe peel the skin off.
Right.
But otherwise, only worth salting if you're going to fry it so that it doesn't absorb so much oil.
Exactly.
So this is the part of the show where we have a question from someone who called in or texted us. And so we're going to listen to that now and answer this question.
Hi, Joy of Cooking. This is Jasmine, and I am currently preparing for a long road trip. And my question for you is, what foods would you prepare ahead of time to take on that long drive? Thanks. Bye-bye.
I mean, I think since we've been talking about eggplant so much, obviously baba ganoush is the thing to make. And one thing I really like about getting the eggplant in the jar is that you can then use the jar to just store the baba ganoush in. And it has a nice screw top. It's a really sturdy jar. So you kind of have your storage container all ready to go. But then, thinking about baba ganoush, I was also thinking about just kind of doing a full-blown mezza platter with like hummus and dolmas and
olives.
Yep. Yeah, all of the things.
Yeah, some things that maybe don't require like dipping while driving.
Or you can, I feel like when we've been on, so John and I have been on a bunch of road trips. True. Because, you went on plenty of road trips before we even met because your parents were living at opposite ends of the country, basically.
Also true.
And so sometimes I remember, like, if you were driving, I would just feed you stuff as we were driving. So you could always just feed the person driving,
yeah,
by hand.
If you guys are still talking. It depends on like what point of the road trip you're in. But yeah, no, good strategy.
Yeah. I do feel like with our road trips so I had never done a really long road trip before we met, and we drove from North Carolina to Portland, Oregon, not long after we met. And one of the things that you did on the road trip that was kind of an eye-opener for me was like we went to a gas station and you were just like, this is the time to get the junk food.
Yes.
And then we will eat better after this. So it's kind of like get whatever you want early on in the road trip, kind of for morale. I don't know. It seemed like it was maybe for morale or like, we don't ever get to do this.
But I just couldn't wait to have junk food again.
Yeah. You couldn't wait to have the gas station hot dog.
The Tijuana Mama, is that what you mean?
Oh yeah, the little sausage. Yeah. There are like these little sausages.
It's the only appropriate time to have the Tijuana Mama.
The sausage is in a plastic sleeve.
It's pickled.
A pickled sausage.
It's a pickled sausage.
Oh, it's pickled?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever had one. I need to add that to my
shelf-stable pickled sausage.
Okay.
But we're getting off topic here. You don't prepare Tijuana Mamas.
No, you don't.
They're prepared for you.
We do the same thing when we road trip, though. We use it as we try not to eat much junk food in general, but that's when I get to go in and buy a bag of Gardettos. Like that's like one thing that I really love.
Yeah.
But that is our chance to kind of like be a little naughty and buy things that we don't normally have. We're also big popcorn people, and I think popcorn's a really good road snack. You can get like bagged white cheddar popcorn, but also making your own ahead of time. I know that one of my favorite mixes that we make has just popcorn and soy sauce and sriracha, and that's just like shaken up and then dumped in a bag. That way it's popcorn. It's not that bad, but then it has the yummy stuff on it. And it's easy to eat in the car too.
Yeah, that's a big plus. Do you put the soy sauce and sriracha on it in advance, or do you like take that with you and then put it on right before you eat it?
In advance, but like you put it in like a little pan and cook it up, then you dump it on. But it just gets a little, it kind of makes it soggy, but that's also kind of delicious.
Yeah.
You can also find, I feel like you can find soy sauce powder.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Might be a good thing to look into.
Yeah.
One thing that was kind of, I don't know, it was a little extra credit. But I do remember we took a trip like pretty soon after we met to visit some friends in New Orleans. And you did they were like the fataye, the little
spinach pies.
Yeah, little spinach pies. But it was with I feel like it was like some leftover curry.
Yeah,
or something like
we
that.
just had some.
We had several
leftovers.
We had several things of leftovers,
Yeah.
and we were just like, okay, well, why don't we make this into a portable snack? And so there was little hand pies.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember the fillings, but they were really good and nice and very easy to eat. Just you don't need anything. The bread is kind of the
it's for
everything in.
It's for the point in the road trip where you're not talking to the person in the other seat, and no one's feeding you.
It's a wall of silence. I don't think think we've ever reached that point in the road trip where we've been really mad at each other. I don't know. Maybe you have.
We were just watching Fargo. It's like total silence. Two can play at that game.
Total silence.
Total silence.
I think it is important as like, if I'm usually the passenger because I don't like driving. It is important as the passenger to kind of keep an eye out for the driver and be that person. Be like, oh, you need a napkin. Oh, let me take this leftover food from you. Let me remove that trash. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's one thing that
I agree.
try to pay attention to.
Yeah, you got to take care of the driver.
There's like etiquette involved in road trip food stuff.
I also feel like we've made batches of granola of your like awesome granola.
My almost burnt granola.
Yeah, almost burnt olive oil granola. So good.
I found that almost burning things is sometimes a good strategy.
So good.
It's where you get the really good flavors.
Like French fries.
Yes,
Almost
like
burnt French fries. Love them.
Or eggplant. Am I allowed to bring it back to eggplant?
Yeah. I agree.
Chari and eggplant. So good.
Other than baba ganoush, I would say, I mean, I'm a big fan of just like a Chex Mix, a snack mix or party mix. And we do have, Joy has a really good recipe for that. I happen to know this week's caller and know that they are vegan, and that recipe has butter in it. So you could easily replace that with like a vegan butter, or probably just use olive oil would be fine, coconut oil. That recipe has you cook some garlic cloves in the oil or the fat to kind of extract the flavor of the garlic. So it makes it like extra tasty. Oh, and lots of Worcestershire sauce. So you might need to use soy sauce instead.
Or some Bragg's.
Or yeah, Bragg's liquid aminos.
The appetizer chapter has several nut recipes. They're all really good. Crisp spicy pecans is great. I think that would be a good snack, kind of a salty sweet combo. Plus the Thai spiced peanuts is something that we added to the last edition.
Those are so good.
So good. So good. Yeah.
You touched on something that I think is important too, that you need a balance of like, you kind of want something creamy, you want something crunchy, you want something sweet, you want something savory. So you like got to hit all the bases in your car snacks. So you got to have a variety, keep things interesting.
Yeah, both textures and, like you said, flavors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, please call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message, or you can also send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Next week's topic comes from a text.
I was born in 1952. I so remember my mother's Joy of Cooking cookbook. Over the years, it became worn and splattered with the recipes she prepared. I especially remember her lemon meringue pie. Not only did it taste good, it was beautiful. I remember the Joy of Cooking cookbook was a common and special wedding and shower gift for young women starting their married lives.
So next week, we will talk all about pie, and maybe specifically lemon meringue pie, because that is a very good pie. So what are you guys thinking about cooking this week? What are you excited to make, or anything you're looking forward to?
Well, I just got some fresh lemongrass from you both, from your garden. So I'm definitely going to be using that this week. I think I'm going to continue kind of with this transition in the weather, try to like really hold on to summer, even though personally I'm very ready for fall because it's my favorite. So just trying to embrace that. And I think this is going to be a good chance for me to continue to be inspired in the kitchen, just talking to you guys about all of that.
Yeah, it's really helpful to like actually talk through what you might do rather than sit at your computer for 2 hours on a Sunday trying to figure out, why is it so hard to figure out what to cook?
I don't know. It's because every day we have to ask each other, what do you want to eat tonight? And sometimes you're just like, I just can't think about it. But it's also really fun. And then when you make something really good, it's just so exciting, especially during the week when you're busy with work stuff.
Yeah.
We stocked up at the farmer's market. From the Peppered Earth people, we stocked up on roasted green chilies. So all of those got frozen, but we did buy some Big Jims. So those are really awesome, really great variety, very thick-walled New Mexican pepper variety. So you char those, peel them, and then turn them into chilies rellenos.
Are you going to make it?
Yeah, I was thinking about it.
Are you going to do the dishes too?
I'll do both. Just this once.
Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us on Instagram at The Joy of Cooking. Stay tuned for next week, where we will tackle pies. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
We could not do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. Thank you to Kayleen Veach, our production coordinator, Haley Bowers, our audio engineer, and Sarah Marshall, our producer.